Saunders with Pittsburgh Postgame, a rare Pirates victory edition of Pittsburgh Postgame, as the Buccos were weekday afternoon winners on getaway day over the Chicago Cubs at PNC Park in Pittsburgh on Thursday. Alan Saunders will be joined shortly by Matt Gajtka here with Pittsburgh Sports Live. Pittsburgh Postgame Pirates, again, a 6-2 final score for the Bucs in their victory today. A strong start from JT Brubaker. I'm sure that will be among the things that Matt and I talk about here as we break down this game. The Pirates, with this win, are now 11-24, but don't worry, they've still got a fairly strong hold on that last place mark in Major League Baseball. The 12-25 Boston Red Sox play later tonight. Matt, to me, I think Brubaker's performance is the big takeaway from today's game. What did you have there?
Really strong. Yeah, I think so too. He's still one of the few relative unknowns as far as starting pitching goes that are going to be out there on the mound for the Pirates for the duration of this shortened season. So every JT Brubaker start gets an extra antenna up from me. I know that much, just because we have heard quite a bit about him from the farm, but also because I don't know that much about him. I haven't seen him pitch that much. So it's an education every time he goes out. And this time around, an education for him, maybe, that he was able to find his way through 5 innings, strike out 5. Anytime you get that strikeout total at or above the inning total, that also catches my eye, too. And 86 pitches, 60 of those for strikes as well. So it's not like he was necessarily going for the strikeout pitch and missing outside or missing inside or missing high, missing low. He was around the zone for the most part, and the stuff was good. Good enough to be around the zone and also get those swings and misses. So a very encouraging start. I would definitely agree from JT.
Yeah, and I'm actually very interested in general as to the way this Pirates team has used its pitching staff and its bullpen. It just feels to me like there's been a ton of 3 and 4 inning starts this year. Some of that has been due to the injuries they've had and hadn't worked guys in that maybe were not in a regular rotation setting, and also some guys coming back from injury like we saw with Joe Musgrove last night. But does it feel like to you there's been a deliberate attempt to have starting pitchers go less far into games? And given the state of the Pirates bullpen, how do you feel like that's worked out?
Well, I don't think it's worked out in terms of wins and losses. It hasn't been good for him. Even someone like Trevor Williams, I was talking about this with a couple of folks on Twitter the other night, just not as efficient as he was, and certainly not as he was at his peak 2 years ago when he was probably the best stretch of pitching he's ever going to put together. It came in 2018. But even last year, even though his results weren't quite there, he's always been known for, as I just talked about with Brubaker, being around the strike zone and getting outs rather quickly. Maybe because he's focusing more, as the Pirates staff is, on breaking balls this year. Perhaps he is not getting that early contact in the counts. But there may be a connection there, Alan, come to think of it, now that I just do some thinking out loud here, because I know the Pirates are under 50% with their fastball usage rate this year. That's the first time since who knows when. It's been since before Ray Searage came to town and took over for Joe Kerrigan way back in 2009 that it's been that case. So I think that might be part of it, the fact that they are perhaps nibbling or perhaps just trying some more off speed and not getting as many balls into play early. Remember, under Clint Hurdle, too, it was always the talk of 3 pitches or less. There's not that emphasis, at least not that outward emphasis on 3 pitches or less, getting guys out or concluding at-bats in 3 pitches or less. So that could be part of it, too. I also think just the strangeness of the season. I don't know if the Pirates want to put undue strain on these guys, especially once the first 2 or 3 weeks were complete and they realized they're probably not going to be a contending team this year. So there's no need to push them into these high leverage or high stress outings, I should say, just in general. So that's my feeling on that one.
Yeah, I do think there was definitely a part of that strategy that the Pirates implemented under Neil Huntington and Clint Hurdle and Ray Searage, really, that they wanted guys to pitch to contact. And the purpose of that was to keep the starting pitchers in the game longer. And I think as we saw that strategy sort of fall apart towards the end of their time in Pittsburgh, there was definitely this call to allow Pirates pitchers to pitch to the strikeout more, to use breaking balls more. But I do think we're seeing sort of the other side of the coin with that strategy, is that if you're trying to strike out every batter, it's really hard to go deep into a game. And if you don't have a deep or good bullpen, that can be just as disastrous as letting the starting pitchers go up there and try to get ground balls all the time. I'm not sure that if you don't have talented pitchers, I'm not sure that this vast change in strategy that was seen in pitching approach from the Pirates really makes that much of a difference.
No, I don't think it does either. You might just be looking at it all coming out in the wash, right? And the reason for the switch to more breaking balls and to get away from the early contact is that it's just universal across the sport. You heard it from Jacob Stallings on the AT&T broadcast today when he stepped in for an inning or two and put the headset on. Just universally, batting average and slugging percentage are higher on fastballs. Guys are better at hitting fastballs than they are at hitting breaking balls. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that way. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that maybe the Pirates are going shorter into games with their starts, because I wanted to look it up anyway and see what the league average was. It's 4.7. So the league average this year in 2020 is less than 5 innings per start. And that doesn't tell you where the state of starting pitching is and where priorities lie. Then I don't know what does. The Pirates, by the way, are below that average at 4.4 innings per start. So they're getting about, 13 outs. 13 of the 27 are coming from the starters. So less than half. And I got to believe that's the first time that that's happened in team history. I can look back a couple here on Baseball Reference if you give me a moment. But I know that the trend has been continuously down, whether it be throughout baseball or with the Pirates too. But overall, yeah, this is what you're seeing. And I don't know if there's any reason to really complain about it necessarily. You just have to accept it. And yeah, just looking back to last season, this is very instructive, actually. League average for last season, 2019, for starting pitchers was about 5 1/3 innings. So we're about 2 outs less on average for a starting pitcher in this 2020 season. So I have to believe there's some caution there. The pitchers weren't able to build up their arms like they usually do prior to the restart of the season, if you will, in late July. And the Pirates were at 5 innings even last year. So they went from 5 even to less than 4.5. So it's a pretty big drop off.
One of the things that I thought happened in Neil Huntington's tenure with the Pirates is that we saw in maybe like about 11 and 12 and 13, the team really embrace some off the wall things. And one of those things was the pitch to contact that really ended up working for them in a big way. You look at defensive shifts, you look at catcher defense, and they really embraced those things. And to me, maybe more so than anything else that management group and that coaching staff did, those were the reasons those teams 13 through 15 were as successful as they were. I see some of that in what the Pirates are doing right now, but in this sort of lost season where there's nothing, they're not playing for anything, I think I would have expected a little more experimentation than we've seen out of this group. You know, it's not like they have played a 4-man outfield a couple times, but it's not like they're out there trying to reinvent the wheel. I haven't seen a ton of creativity from this group when it comes to trying to attack old problems with new solutions.
Yeah, I was curious if we might see more of that piggybacking type of thing. We did see it a few times with Cool and Brault. And if you're a follower of minor league baseball, that's not exactly revolutionary, but it would be at the major league level to have 2 stacked starting pitcher types in order to get you through 6 or 7 or 8 innings. I might like to see that in the future, but as of right now, with some guys injured or coming back from injury in the case of Joe Musgrove, I'm not sure the personnel in terms of the numbers is there right now. I also think in a lot of ways, some of the innovation has already been innovated. I don't think there's as many avenues for creativity. Maybe I'm just being not very creative in saying that. I'm not sure I would have necessarily seen the focus on catcher defense as being something big. But I think the fact is, though, Alan, that overall baseball has gotten a lot smarter over the past decade, and especially over the past 5 or 6 years. And the Pirates' ways of finding those extra edges and winning that way, or at least getting an edge in some games that way, it's not going to be as easy as it was. And that's just the way it is in any industry, right? Whenever your secrets come out, or whenever one team or one entity starts to innovate, then there's going to be copycats, and people are eventually going to find out. There are personnel matters as far as people getting jobs elsewhere. They're not going to swear themselves to secrecy. They're going to take those so-called secrets with them to other organizations. I think we've seen that too with regards to the Pirates' former front office members moving elsewhere. So it's a combination of things. And secrets don't stay secret for very long in a very high competitive environment like Major League Baseball or any kind of major league sport. So in that way, I guess I'm not surprised by it. I think for a while, small market teams, or at least teams willing to take those chances and maybe look foolish for a bit with some of the shifts, as the Pirates were so aggressive with those. There was a time for them to be ahead of the curve. But now it almost feels like, to me, the last 2 or 3 years, that we're right back to where we were in the first decade of this century, when I think myself and many among us here in Pittsburgh were despairing that the Pirates could never compete because they don't have the financial firepower. And now even the rich teams are smart. It used to be the poor teams had to get smart. Now the rich teams are smart too. And so you're right back to that old competitive imbalance.
Yeah, and I think it's actually maybe even increased the competitive imbalance because you're talking about those personnel moves. I have not seen Ben Cherington out here hiring gads of analysts or anything like that would lead me to believe that some sort of new quantitative revolution is coming from this team. I just don't see it. It seems like if a team's going to do that, it's going to be a team with the finances to go hire up the best minds from 4 or 5 clubs and put together some sort of huge department. And that's not going to be the Pirates. And so I kind of wonder if that niche, right, that market inefficiency, I guess, was the thing that it always used to get called, is maybe semi-permanently closed for a team like the Pirates. I don't know that there's a way to reopen that.
No, and it is a shame, right? Because as you say, if there was a season to try some things, it would be right now, and especially now at this point when you're 20 games under 500 or whatever the Pirates are at this moment. Sorry, 13 games under 500. It feels like 20, but it's only 13. 10 games back of Chicago for the top spot in the National League Central, if you're into that sort of thing right now. But this would be the time to throw some stuff out there, and I'm just not sure that there is that appetite. I'm not sure there is that level of thinking right now in the Pirates front office. I think they're more concerned about good old-fashioned player evaluation, seeing who can hang at this level, seeing who may have a future with the Pirates and with the next good team, as Ben Cherington has referred to it a couple of times. Clearly, we're not in the era of the next good Pirates team. 2021 is probably going to be a struggle too. So it is almost open tryouts, or it is open tryouts essentially at this moment. And I don't really see any huge innovations on the horizon here. I'm not really sure what I would even look at. You mentioned the 4-man outfield. Perhaps you can try some more softball style defensive alignments, but I think for the most part, the juice has been squeezed from that orange. And so what you're going to see is more of a Cole Tucker in the outfield, which I don't think any of us really saw coming heading into the season. And more just trying guys at different spots. You see Colin Moran no longer playing third base. At least it seems like he's been exhausted as a viable option over there at the hot corner. I don't want to see Josh Bell play very much more first base. And the Pirates should just get ready for the inevitable DH only future of the National League here, and just keep Bell there and not even give him a chance to affect games with the glove negatively. Maybe you even I don't know, if you're looking at trying some crazy things, you're putting Tucker in the outfield, Gregory Polanco at first base. I have no idea. He was a DH today. I'm just trying to really reach out there to the far frontiers of the galaxy here in order to find something for you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other things that feels disappointing about this season. And it's not just that, the Pirates have not only been not good, but generally underperformed expectations, which were already not good. But I just think there doesn't seem to be a whole lot to grasp onto that feels like it might be cause for hope. And that's something that can come in a lot of different forms. We saw a little bit of it the other night with Brian Hayes putting up a fairly spectacular rookie debut. But, I think that you could derive just as much hope from a tactic or a plan or something if you're a fan of this team. It doesn't have to just be, oh, this guy looks really good. It doesn't seem to be any of that right now.
It's a tough year, and I find myself, just personally speaking, it's difficult to really think about the Pirates as a competitive entity this season because of the shortened year, number one. And because of just the weirdness of 2020 overall, there are no fans in the stands. The energy at these games is really nil. And I think it comes across on television too. But also the fact that they are probably at their competitive nadir in terms of actual major league talent on the roster. So a bunch of things, a bunch of factors have consolidated here and combined in order to make this a real dud of a season. And a season that I think the Pirates probably hope goes away sooner rather than later. And they're almost to the finish line. I know we're halfway past the midway point. We'll see how many of those games they miss that they make up. They may not even get to 60. And if they don't, then it's probably a blessing because it prevents any chance of injury to some of these young players. That's really the only disastrous thing that can happen from here on out. So there's not a lot to lose at this point, but that also contributes to just the overall blah feeling. And well, speaking of the lack of energy coming across on the telecast, you look at the ratings, the Pirates, Alan, have had a pretty strong local rating, even in the past 2 or 3 seasons when they've mostly languished below 500. And it was clear that the genie was out of the bottle in the Neil Huntington, Clint Hurdle era. It looked like it was come to an end. Even last year, they were, I believe, top 5 or at least top 3rd in terms of local television ratings. The Pirates have dropped about 20 to 30% off their local ratings. So even though with not much going on, even with the Penguins washing out in a week and with the Steelers still a couple of weeks away from starting their season, with all this doubt surrounding sports in general, people still aren't tuning into the Pirates right now. And that's rather unprecedented, at least in this decade, since the start of maybe the 2010, 2011 season, that Pirate Renaissance. We can safely say that flame has been fully extinguished.
Yeah, it's not a good time for the Pirates right now, and like you said, there's it's going to get worse because there's other alternatives coming on the very near horizon, right? I mean, football season is now about to be in full swing in Western Pennsylvania anyway, maybe not all the way across the world, but we're making plans to be covering high school football games in 8 days, and college football games in 9, and pro football just beyond that. So the eyeballs are not going to come anytime soon. Alan Saunders, Matt Gajtka here with Pittsburgh Postgame. Pirates, a rare victory over the Chicago Cubs, 6-2 at PNC Park in an afternoon game. JT Brubaker, once again, impressive. And we didn't talk about Bryan Reynolds and his dad's strength performance. Leads off the game with a double, then gets a home run in his second at bat to put the Pirates ahead. Shades of Rob Makoviak and his legendary performance the day his son was born. Matt, we've both obviously been through that as dads. You think there's anything to that? The dad first game back, I don't know. Does that give a guy a jolt?
I think it does. Your whole system just goes through the ringer, and not to maximize it too much because obviously your female partner is going through the ringer a lot more than you are. But at least emotionally speaking, there is an adrenaline rush there. And I know for me, you're riding high the first 3 or 4 days just because your body and mind knows that it has to get you through. You're not sleeping much. You're adjusting to new schedules. Just the excitement and showing the baby off, at least in a normal year, to all the people who want to see it. So I think there is something to that. I also know, speaking from personal experience the last couple of weeks, that adrenaline rush doesn't last forever. And there is that crash and your body does have to recover at some point. So if you're Bryan Reynolds, you hope at least it lasts for a couple of weeks here. And let's also not minimize the fact that maybe he was thinking a lot about his wife and this strange year that it is. There are many more concerns and stressors on all of us, but especially those of us with young kids or expecting fathers and mothers. So that's also probably a relief to him that the whole situation is in the rearview mirror and he can move on with that and at least try to finish the season strong, because it's been a rather horrific sophomore campaign for Bryan Reynolds at the plate. Even after the 2 for 4 today with the 3-run dinger, he's hitting 196 with a 277 OBP and a 364 slugging. So Reynolds, just his 3rd homer of the year. The Pirates are looking for a lot more from him, and maybe he can at least ride the burst of dad strength for a week or so. And at this point, a week or so can get you pretty close to the end.
And, I do think hitting is such a mental thing at times. And I said this last night talking with Mike Osti, and Josh Bell had that sort of, just kind of laid one down the third base line and got himself on first base and another guy's in the middle of a miserable season at the plate. I think sometimes, for whatever reason, just seeing some good results for a change can go a long way for these guys. I mean, it's such a grind. I think it is really one of the most underestimated things in sports, even in an abbreviated year, how much of a grind a baseball season is. And when things aren't going your way, it's pretty easy to get into a pretty negative space, I think, for these guys, and especially players that don't have long track records of success. I remember even a guy like Andrew McCutchen, who was one of the best players in the world. There were some times towards the end of his tenure in Pittsburgh where things weren't going his way, and you could just tell the guy was lost. He didn't have answers for what was ailing him, and you kind of get out of that confidence zone that I think is so important. So maybe the dad strength adrenaline will wear off, but maybe some positive results can go a long way for a guy like Bryan Reynolds the rest of this year to get him back into a better place.
Well, speaking of Andrew McCutchen, you'll recall a couple of times when he was in a deep slump, we saw Clint Hurdle go to the full series break, or at least multi-game break, to recalibrate him and get him back on track. I think people sometimes laugh at the idea of baseball as an attrition sport, as a sport that exhausts you, but it is every day. And for as much as there may be inactivity compared to other sports like hockey or football or basketball or soccer, there's also the fact that you have to stay switched on for so long. And say you're playing a game like last night, you're waiting through an hour and a half rain delay to start. You're out there until about midnight, and then you got to unwind and recharge for a day game after a night game. This stuff is not easy. Just compare it to your normal life where you have to be focused at work, and I'll be honest with yourself and say that you aren't always the most focused you have to be, and think about how much mental strength it takes to be locked in on each and every pitch, doing one of the most challenging things to do in all of sport, which is to hit a baseball at the major league level. So it can compile upon itself, and there can also be that fatigue factor. So with Reynolds going on that paternity leave, I wouldn't rule that out as well, as at least being a reason for him looking rather fresh and spry at the plate this afternoon.
We'll do our 3 up, 3 down here. We try to do this somewhat faithfully in every one of these broadcasts. And also, if you got something that you'd like us to get to, throw a comment in there in the live chat. We'll try to get to it. We've obviously talked about sort of the two big pluses from today's game, and that was Brubaker's start and Bryan Reynolds showing something. I thought the bullpen showed an improved amount of resiliency. It wasn't like they didn't allow base runners, but I thought Howard and Hartley particularly got themselves into some high leverage situations and got themselves out of it. And that's two guys, if you look at their season numbers, are starting to get to something approaching decent anyway. A 2.63 ERA for Howard, 2.20 for Hartley, and relievers live in small sample sizes in normal years. This year, to a ridiculous extent, but it seems like maybe for the first time this year there might be something there to the middle part of the Pirates bullpen. I'll go with a plus there.
And something to add on there for Jeff Hartley, that's now 16 at-bats that the opposition has had against him this season, with runners in scoring position and 2 outs, and 0 times they've come through. He retired Cameron Maben, the newest Cub, on a bases loaded 2-out situation in the 6th to preserve the 4-2 lead, and shortly thereafter Cole Tucker dumped in a 2 RBI single. So if you're talking pivot points and high leverage, you can't always look at ERA and not even always look at WHIP when it comes to relief success, at least in the context of a game and the ebbs and the flows of win percentage. So Hartley getting Maben to fly out, that's got to be right up there when you look at the spots in the game, the big outs that the Pirates got to collect a win. So you're going to go with 1 up there. I'm going to go with a down, though, related to Cole Tucker. I know I mentioned the RBI single, but he hit it at about 60 miles per hour, approximately, via StatCast. He is in the first percentile. That is among the 100th of major league hitters, as far as right at the bottom of exit velocity average on the season. Barrel contact isn't much better. It's below 10th percentile. I know Cole Tucker is an easy guy to root for, and I think he's doing pretty well in the outfield, all things considered. But even with that RBI single, a 2 RBI single today, all it did was remind me of how softly he's putting the ball in play, and a reminder that he may not be long for this level, at least when it comes to having a viable bat.
Yeah, that's something I've been sort of thinking for a while. But maybe I think his improved center field defense from when he first got put out there does at least give some hope that he could be a defense first utility player at this level. If you can play center field well and you can play shortstop well defensively, that'll keep you a job for a long time, even if you don't hit very, very well in most times. And I think especially now, if you're looking at a DH, pinch hitting becomes less important. So there's more of an ability to keep a strong defender on a bench than there is a guy who's a pure pinch hitter. And so I think maybe there's been some positive for Tucker this season, but to me, he looked like a guy that was overmatched last year. His AAA and AA numbers were not impressive. I've been pretty skeptical that he's going to magically turn into a quality major league hitter for a while, so I'm not particularly surprised with what we've seen from him at the plate so far. I'll go with an up here, and it's cheating because I'm not using today's game, but tomorrow's doubleheader against the Reds. And I like double headers. I really liked, and I don't mind the 7-inning version of them either. I think one of the things that's happened with this condensed schedule, there's been a ton of them, and they play fewer double headers in the majors in 2019 than they had ever, I believe. And I just think that's something that's a part of the game that I enjoy. I think they're fun, and I think it's a better way than keeping the season at this absurd length that it is to get in the number of games that both the players and the owners want there to be. I think there should be more doubleheaders, and so I'm looking forward to tomorrow's. And just in general, I've appreciated the way the schedule has moved along at its pace in this weird season.
Well, I totally agree with you there on that, and I think you and I are simpatico on a lot of innovation in sports. But I'll spin that into a down because I have heard so much resistance to, number one, these 7-inning doubleheaders, which, again, referring back to, if you have any kind of experience watching minor league baseball, I worked in the minors for a year about 10 years ago down in Charleston for the Power. And, 7-inning doubleheaders, that's just how we did our business. That's how you get the games in, and that's how you don't overextend pitching staffs, too. So I wouldn't mind that being a thing once a week in the major leagues, 2 games, each 7 innings, and get those results in. And with how pitchers are being more and more inefficient these days, I think that's also a health benefit as well. But I keep hearing people say, it's just a 1-year thing. I'm so glad it's just a 1-year thing. Similarly to the extra inning rules, which I also like. I never had a problem with in softball when you put a runner at second base, international tiebreak after the 7th inning. You play every day, again, like I was talking about. And I want to see the best possible product out there. I don't want to see guys dragging the day after a 16-inning game, or I don't want to see 10 guys called up from AAA the day after a 16-inning game or an 18-inning game. We've seen the Pirates go very deep in the past several seasons on multiple occasions. And I guess there's a certain morbid curiosity and a manic fun to it when it's at 1 and 2 in the morning. But also, you're trying to put a good product out there on the field, and you're trying to get a result. You're trying to bring people back in an era with decreasing attention spans. You're trying to get people to stay locked in. It's hard to do that, Alan, when these games are going so long. So I like the high leverage. I like how it ups the ante when you put runners on. And for me, like for instance, the other night in the series opener against the Cubs, the Cubs scored a run in the top of the 10th. And normally I would have said, with the Pirates offense especially being totally terrible this year, I would have just gone to bed. But I stayed up. I stayed engaged with the game because I thought, well, at least they're going to have a runner at second here to start the bottom of the 10th. And lo and behold, Brian Hayes ends up scoring the tying run. They go to 11th and they still lose. But at the same time, it kept me engaged as a fan. And I think baseball has to really think that way. So my down goes to all the people out there who are poo-pooing the fact that this tiebreak rule might continue into 2021.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both of those as well. Getting back to the roster, I guess, a little bit, or the product on the field today, I'll give an up to Jacob Stallings. We mentioned him earlier a little bit, joining the TV broadcast, and like I've gotten to know Jacob very well over the years, and he's not, the most talkative guy. He's a little bit quiet. But what a great insight on the game that inning was, listening to him. I guess it was 2 innings or a whole inning, maybe a whole inning, top and bottom, talking about pitch framing and the catcher's interaction with the umpires. And, I think that's one of the things that as without the fans in the stands, I think there's been a struggle on these broadcasts a little bit to inject some interest and some energy into some things that are happening. I think one of those ways is to get that deeper insight that we never got before. And I thought that was outstanding. Getting John Wayner to pick Jacob Stallings' brain on the TV side today. And I just think more of that, please. That's something that it doesn't take a pandemic to do. And what a fascinating insight into the game, maybe for someone that's not aware of those minute details of interactions between umpires and catchers and things like that.
Well, just generally, Alan, from my time on the beat, I love talking to catchers because it's such a thinking man's position. You have to be totally engaged all the time. You're working with dozens of pitchers throughout the season. That's why I was always frustrated when Francisco Cervelli took forever to get out of the training room after the games. I wanted to talk to him. So I was, in my era, from covering most of the games that I did, Chris Stewart was the backup. And my God, what an interview he was. So I'm sure you agree with me there. Stu was pretty spectacular. But overall, in general, if you want to get the pulse of a team, I think you go to the catcher and you figure out all the intricacies, and that's where all the action happens. And if I were to start over as a Major League Baseball player, or just as a competitive baseball player in general, I never really played at a high level or a competitive level at all, but I would be a catcher because we always hear catchers talk about it. You're right in the action all the time. And when you talk to converted catchers, guys who start at that position and go elsewhere, they always talk about how bored they are at other spots, especially if they go to the outfield or even just first base or third base. They realize that this game can be a rather slow pace when you're not calling pitches, when you're not getting shaken off, when you're not going out to the mound, when you're not considering all the scouting reports that you had to look at prior to the game. So, here. I'd love to hear from more catchers. Of course, Jacob Stallings, he's playing so well this year. He's not going to have the chance to sit in the stands and talk to Joe and Rock very often. But at the same time, I'm glad that they did. And I'll go to my final down. I guess I'll be the real negative guy here on today's show. But two more errors for the Pirates, Eric Gonzalez and JT Riddle. It was an error-filled game last night as well, Wednesday night, both mentally and physically. So two back-to-back ugly games. This time the Pirates bats and the pitching came through to bail them out. But if you're looking at a rebuilding team, you want to at least play fundamentally well to give yourself a chance. They don't have the talent on most nights, at least, or they haven't had the performance to overcome some of these big mistakes. So after a really difficult kind of a heartbreaker, an extended heartbreaker due to the rain on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, just a stinker after another rain delay, you get this one today. At least they didn't get delayed, but at the same time, the Pirates' mistakes stood out. And I know Derek Shelton, he's got that grace period for the first-year manager, and I'm sure it's not giving him too much indigestion at the moment just because of where they are in the standings. But you come in as a new manager, you want to set a tone here, and I'm not sure that at least the last few days has set the tone that Shelton wants for his version of the Pirates.
Yeah, that was actually one of my. You're recycling one of my downs from the other night, so I'm glad it was you and not me that had to say it again. But that's certainly something that needed to be said because, and we're talking about. To me, it just looks like a lack of mental focus. And I think that's very discouraging as well. When you're, I think it's understandable because this is a team that has nothing to play for. Have to. I mean, if you're a JT Riddle, or why do you even care what happens here? I don't even know. First of all, I mean, that could be its own conversation, is why is JT Riddle
why is he playing
in a ball game? But I don't know what is there to care about, what is there to play for. And yes, guys, they care about their own numbers, right? Even if they don't care about team success. Guys don't want to have a 150 batting average, but I don't think anybody is really going to finally examine how many errors a guy had in a disaster of a season like this. So maybe that's an area where the personal pride and errors in general have been a little bit devalued in favor of the advanced defensive statistics. So maybe that's just a part of the game that these guys don't care as much about individually. And maybe we're seeing that play out on a team level. But yeah, that's something that I've been touching on. I feel like I've been touching on repeatedly throughout this season. So you're giving me a plus left. I don't know that I have one. Oh my, this, I've been intrigued I guess is the word I would use, by the play of Anthony Alford. He's a guy that has a ton of potential, and it just it never really worked out with him in Toronto, and it didn't look great today at the plate. But that's the kind of thing that looking at, basically going back to my very first talking point, is like, yeah, why not take a flyer on a guy who was a top prospect? This is a year where nothing else is happening. Why not try some stuff? And you just looking at him, he looks the part of a guy who could be a star outfielder. And so why not give him a whole bunch of at bats here over the next month and a half and see what happens? I think this is maybe one of the rare things and you can criticize the management, I think, a little bit. Why are guys like Derek Holland and JT Riddle still getting meaningful at bats and meaningful opportunities? But here's a guy that absolutely should be getting those opportunities, because he's a player that maybe could turn into something in the future where those guys are not. You don't have to call up prospects necessarily to be trying guys out. You can ply the waiver wire just as easily and see if you can turn some of that coal into a diamond that the other teams have cast off. And maybe that's a way to make something out of the end of this season.
Well, to your point, 6'1", 210 pounds, 26 years old, though. So former third-round pick from 2012, and to date, just 80 plate appearances in the major leagues going into today's game. So in that way, he's an unknown entity at this level, but it's also an indictment that he hasn't been able to carve out a spot for a Blue Jays team the last 3 years that hasn't been terribly good. So the 171 average with the 303 slug so far in those 80 plate appearances, yeah, it tells part of a story, but 80 plate appearances is just worth about 20 or 30 games for a typical full-time player. So he does have some runway here for sure under Derek Shelton. And that's also part of the reason why I was disappointed in the trade deadline. Did I understand why the Pirates weren't terribly active with all the uncertainties of this season, and with the fact that several of their guys were either hurt or underperformed, guys they were hoping they could flip for some value here and for some intriguing young players. Just didn't work out this year. It was a total dud in that way too. So we talk about this season and maybe its lack of spark. A lot of that is also there were really not that many trades. Dyson left, and that was about it. You heard some rumblings about Chad Kuhl and Joe Musgrove, so at least we know the industry values them outside the Pirates organization. So I suppose that's a good thing. But you're going to have to look to guys like Anthony Alford for any kind of fresh blood excitement here in the final 20-odd games of the season.
Speaking of those final games, we'll look ahead here a little bit. They've got the doubleheader against the Reds. I don't know. Do we see a starting pitcher for I know Stephen Brault has the first game on Friday.
Second game was TBD last I saw.
Yeah, last I saw against Trevor Bauer, our old frenemy, I guess, friend of the statistical side of my brain and foe of the polite side, I think is the best way to put it.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
Luis Castillo and Stephen Brault will battle in the first game, and Mike Asti will have Pirates post game with Kyle Dawson of Trib Live Media after that one. Matt, anything final before we wrap things up here?
Just going to talk baseball again. Was out for about a week there. Spent the vacation in Michigan, where it's interesting. I don't think Tigers fans thought they'd be in contention, but my father-in-law was big on them picking up somebody at the deadline. I said, I'm not sure they're that good, but I also understand the other side of it. So I'll say it was interesting in watching teams like the Tigers and teams that are ostensibly in it, because almost everyone's in it right now outside of the Pirates and Red Sox. But to see those teams try to decide where they wanted to go with this season, because assuming we play it out and we do get a World Series championship, that flag is going to fly as high as any that's out there. So I think about this season the same way I think about the NBA or the NHL season, where in 5 years, heck, in 1 year, you're going to be saying, wow, there was really an opportunity there for some teams that they never got close to again. So unfortunately, that's not going to be the Pirates this season. They're just too darn far out of it, even with 16 playoff teams in 2020. But at the very least, you're going to see a pretty interesting pennant stretch. You can't even really call it a pennant chase because the pennant doesn't matter in the regular season here. It's much more like some of the other sports, for better or worse. But I'm just glad we're playing baseball, and I'm glad we'll see some high leverage games coming up. So around baseball, very interesting, despite whenever you turn on the Pirates game, TV or radio, it just seems so sleepy and like an alternate universe.
That'll wrap it up for us again tomorrow after the doubleheader. Pirates and Reds, Mike Osti and Kyle Dawson. I assume we'll be back over the weekend. Matt, you've got the Hounds on Sunday. They're at the Red Bulls, I believe, right?
Saturday. It was actually moved from Sunday to Saturday. So yeah, the Hounds can maintain a 6-point lead in their group, or even grow it to 7 or 9 potentially, depending on what Hartford does. So Pittsburgh just has 5 games left now, and they'll settle into more of a Saturday only schedule from here on out until the end of the regular season. So missing their captain, Canardo Forbes, for the next few weeks due to a quad injury. That'll hurt, but guys like Pittsburgh's own midfielder Robbie Mertz will get more of an opportunity here. And hey, Pittsburgh's first place team continues to roll on, and they have a couple of home games coming up. I suppose it doesn't really matter because it's limited attendance only to season ticket holders, just a smattering for each game, but you can still catch all the games on 22 The Point and ESPN Plus, and we'll continue to have our post-game shows, our Pittsburgh post-game shows. Myself, John Krasinski, Matt Grubba, Rachel McCrieger, we've all chimed in. Rachel Krieger. Forgot she changed her name this year. Want to get that right. But we've all had our input on the Hounds as they try to push for a 3rd consecutive playoff berth. Looks all but cinched at this point, which is a rarity in franchise history.
All right. Yep. Hounds over the weekend. Matt will be there. More baseball tomorrow night. Mike and Kyle. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Alan Saunders from Matt Gajtka and everyone else at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Thanks for watching. Pittsburgh postgame. Bucks win 6-2. Enjoy it. There haven't been many.